While very few people were aware of this research outside of the industry, the perception by parents that these shows were way too manipulative was nonetheless there, and a backlash against these shows began almost immediately. The Action for Children's Television, or ACT, protested against shows like G.I. Joe and He-Man, saying that they blur the distinction between program content and commercial speech, and demanded that many of the old regulations be brought back. This would lead the producers of these programs to make what business types call loss leaders. Loss leaders are a service or product that a business offers that purposely loses them money. Why would anybody do this? Loss leaders are offered for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's just to get you into the store, like when a store advertises a killer deal on a video game, but when you show up, they tell you they are sold out. The most famous example is disposable razors. The razor is reasonably priced, so you go ahead and buy one, but when you have to buy replacement blades for it, they cost almost as much as the razor. Other times, companies will create loss leaders to diffuse criticism of them over something that they did. On television, you'll see examples of this in ads that aren't advertising anything the company sells, but merely informing you of some of the charitable things that they are doing to improve the world. Sometimes a company will run ads like this when they don't even offer anything that you could buy from them. The most recent example of this are the BP commercials. As you all know, BP has come under a lot of fire because of the oil spill they were responsible for in the Gulf of Mexico. The BP commercials that aired never directly advertise anything. They're just there to tell you about the feel-good green research they're spending money on. The goal is to make you feel warm and fuzzy about BP to counter all the bad things you've heard about them elsewhere. It's their way of saying to you, hey, we're not so bad. Look at how much we care about the planet. Some might argue that these commercials are intended to advertise BP gas stations, but these commercials play nationwide in places where there are no BP branded gas stations, like where I live in Arizona. Besides, BP gas stations only make up a very small portion of their profits. They're not spending millions on these ads to help gas stations that barely show up as a blimp on their profit margins. But I digress. The producers of these new ad driven cartoons knew that they would create controversy right off the bat. To soften some of the anger, these cartoons would include a short public service announcement or life lesson at the end of the show. Often these PSAs would somehow tie into the action or plot of the rest of the show, as if trying to suggest that the whole show was about safety or some civic moral. Shows like The Littles, Denver the Last Dinosaur, CBS Story Break, and Galaxy High, to name a few, were all one way or another attempts to show that television networks were producing shows that influenced children in positive ways. Denver the Last Dinosaur tries to teach children about developing friendships with others. CBS Story Break tried to encourage kids to read by airing movie adaptations of popular children's novels. Galaxy High is the most interesting of all. It tried to teach kids about multiculturalism and racial tolerance. In the cartoon, Doyle and Amy are transferred from a normal high school on Earth to one located on an asteroid with a student body consisting of hundreds of different alien races. On Earth, Doyle is a superb athlete on the school's football team, a highly popular student whose triumphs on the field are prominently celebrated, while Amy is a diligent bookworm whose high grades and deep intellect mostly get her indifference and occasionally scorn from her classmates. This was intended to reflect America's culture of valuing athleticism over scholarship. When the two are transferred to Galaxy High, the tables are turned as the culture there values scholarship above all else. Amy flourishes while Doyle struggles, but both have to overcome challenges in adapting to an environment where they're not only the minority, but where the customs and people are completely alien to them. No pun intended. The production value on Galaxy High is very high for something made for television. I think it was intended to be held up as CBS's best example of the network creating shows in the best interest of children. But it's hardly known because any serious efforts to market it were abandoned due to the surging popularity of another CBS children's show, Pee Wee's Playhouse. It's unfortunate because Galaxy High is a real gem. Its time slot was constantly moved around, so it had difficulty developing an audience until it was canceled after barely a year. If you're looking for something a little different that has excellent animation and very interesting, if not fully fleshed out ideas, I recommend checking it out. But getting back to Reagan, Reagan's political ideology led him to believe that the free market would naturally create children's programming that was enriching and spiritually uplifting. Parents would ban purposely manipulative programming like He-Man and Transformers and lead their children to watching shows that were educational and empowering. Unfortunately, Reagan's ideology of the free market killing shows that were bad for children failed tremendously. Instead, it created a wild west of unregulated shows that really did blur the line between commercial, entertainment, and educational television. This made it hard for parents to not only distinguish shows that were having a negative impact on their children, but because of the new psychological techniques these shows were using to draw and hook in new viewers, it was making it extremely difficult for parents to keep children away from shows they did feel were bad for their kids. The rising tide of anger by parents and organizations like ACT would end this Wild West era of children's programming in 1990 with the passing of the Children's Television Act. This law would require television stations broadcasting children's programming to air at least 3 hours per week of educational shows during the time they normally aired their cartoons. Educational shows that were aired to meet this new regulation were marked with an E/I, which stood for educational and informational. The law, while not directly regulating children's programming very much, still changed the way they were produced going forward. It was a shot across the bow for many network executives, signaling a big change in the regulatory environment of their industry. The new law, along with an oversaturation of cartoons attempting to duplicate the success of shows like He-Man and G.I. Joe, and the growth of cable television which had channels solely dedicated to airing children's programming like Nickelodeon, led to a sharp decline in these particular types of shows being made. There would still be licensed shows with product tie-ins into the 90s, but they were fewer and far between, and much tamer in the way they used the shows as an advertising vehicle. Media professors that teach this history in their college classes report that their students will often get hostile with them when teaching about this part of history. Students will start denying the veracity of the history they are teaching. Children who grew up in the 80s have strong personal and emotional attachments to these shows, which makes it hard for them to believe how crassly manipulative they were. No one wants to believe that they were tricked and that their attachment and nostalgia these shows create for them isn't so much from their heart, but a purposeful result of marketing and psychological research. But that's why it's called The Secret History of Saturday Morning Cartoons. Thank you for watching.